So, welcome to TheDustyFeet.com, because this is a place where you can safely explore the endless ways of God, interconnection of His creation, where belief understandings, they may be challenged, divine misunderstandings, they may exist, and traditional teachings, they might falter as we pursue connection, context, and community with God and each other here in an environment of grace and love. So, feel free to journey around the space. Explore. We have many different topics for discussion outside the class: Sons of the Father, the Bible Project, Aleph Beta, Follow the Red String, and more. Lend your ear and then lend your voice. Join a conversation, start a conversation, ask questions, because on this journey, you're probably around folks that just might be pondering the same thing: community that can build and connect. So come on in and join us. And welcome to The Dusty Feet. So, good evening. Welcome to Dusty Feet. It's August 10th, 2023, and this is another one of our special series, The Sons of the Father. We're continuing our discussions on The Chosen, created by Dallas Jenkins. And tonight, we'll be talking about season 2, episode 7, Reckoning. During this series, my dad, John Warren, my brother, Jim Warren, and of course myself, we're going to be having a chat. But we'll be reflecting on things that have impacted us along our way. So, welcome to the Sons of the Father. In the description below are links to all of the audio, video, and source documents that we use here in the Dusty Feet. We want to make sure that any material we use here is properly credited to those folks who work so hard to bring it to us. Without their efforts, the learning we do here does not happen. And of course on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe and click that bell icon if you want to remind. And here we are again, the Sons of the Father. It's something again we always reference up front. Sometimes issues can arise from discussions like these and the assumptions that we have on others listening. It's always unintentional, but if you don't understand something or you have a question concerning something that we've talked about, please feel free to just leave a comment. We'll get back to it and respond as best we can. Or you can just always send an email to bob@TheDustyFeet.com. Sometimes that's just a more private way to talk about it. Okay, Reckoning. I'm going to start off by saying this. I personally find the character of Atticus to be fascinating. And I might broach, maybe he's a bit conflicted at times. So, that said, gents, what do we got? Daddy-o.
Well, you probably think Atticus is interesting because you spent 20 plus years in the Air Force and you probably ran into a few Atticuses. But I find him very interesting, especially in this episode when he starts to talk about his struggle with these different thoughts about who Jesus is, and he rattles off all of these things, and he said he tells of his miracles and that, and he says he's not scary, and that's scary to me. That he's not scared, and so because he doesn't have a box. He can't find a box for Jesus, which is the truth today. He doesn't have a box. And that's what's so fascinating about being a follower of his, and how he uh, meets and greets people, and all of our different personalities, and he loves us the same. Uh, what I found, I was talking with your mother about the episode, and she says to me it's fretting, and that was the overarching word. And if when she first said it, I didn't. Then I looked up what fretting, and it absolutely fits it. I mean, everybody was fretting. Um, Atticus, Quintus, Shmuel. I mean, nobody just felt, except, well, the disciples were too, but for very
Mm-hmm.
different reasons. They were fretting. They were fretting about the danger from the outside, and all the rest of them were thinking about him as the danger to them. Rome, they don't like gathering of crowds. What's he trying to do? The uh, rabbis and all, they didn't like him coming up and rocking their boat. Um, and it so uh, they felt they expressed worry, annoyance, and discontent. Those were kind of the words that some were worried about him, some were discontented with him, and the disciples were not without their own questions, as we saw in Andrew and their disagreement about how Jesus. They need to go. They can't let him be arrested by the Romans. They got to go, argue and try to get him out. I thought it was interesting. Was it Gaius? He goes up to him and he says, "Tell me, what does Matthew see in you? What are you offering him?"
Yeah.
Because Jesus has said he was hungry,
Mm-hmm.
and he says, "Come on, that guy ate, the best. Well."
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus says, "That's for that discussion is for another time."
Yeah.
And when Jesus was in with Quintus, he never answers a question. He either makes a statement or he
Mm-hmm.
returns it with another question, and it's just brilliant, the way that he never means to offend. But what I notice is Atticus is just listening. He's listening to everything Jesus says and that Quintus is saying, and he doesn't say anything till Jesus leaves. And then he says, "So you don't see anything wrong with this?" And he said, "No, as long as he's not doing anything." And Atticus just shakes his head. He's walking out, and he's thinking to himself, "You have no idea what's going to happen," because he obviously, in his job, has seen others with similar.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have any idea what Jesus is going to do, but he's comparing them to others that he
Yeah.
has met in his experience. So I was captivated from the very beginning of it all the way through to the end, when he's in with Matthew, wakes Matthew up, and at the end, the last line is, "It's time. It's time."
Hmm.
Yikes! What It was an incredible episode. So, how about you guys?
Mm-hmm.
James.
It's interesting because when he said it's time, we know what's coming. It's the Sermon on the Mount, which is the sermon to end all sermons kind of message that totally rocks the boat and shakes things up. Um, Turns it upside down is really what it does, and that's what I loved in the dialogue between um, Quintus and Jesus. And Dad, you hit it on the head. The way Quintus spoke, always another question kind of thing. But then that's the way Jesus always talked, especially to the Pharisees, but to the Romans. He always asked another question, or,
Yeah.
answer what the real question really was about. And you got two of these incredibly intelligent men who also understand their authority. Quintus knew what his authority was. Jesus did too. In fact, Jesus said, I can't make you do anything.
Yeah.
But then I loved what he followed up with, but my father didn't even finish the sentence, and he knew, and so it's like two immovable forces coming together. And I think they even said at one point, well, at least we know what we can't promise.
Yeah.
Yeah,
On
what
both
we
sides.
can and cannot promise. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And so it was interesting. You were talking about fretting. I was saying, to me, it was like conflicted. There was just so many conflicted feelings there. And where, Quintus was saying, you know, Jesus, I kind of like you, as long as you don't mess things up,
I can't
um,
promise.
and that's the what's the word? The confusion when here was Jesus preaching peace. I mean, that really was his message, was peace. It was internal peace, but it was peace. And Quint is like, hey, as long as you're preaching peace, we're good. Once you start creating problems, we're not so good. And that's the way the world has always looked at Jesus. As long as he says nice things, we like him. He says a lot of great things, but when he starts saying things that, go against the grain, he's not such a likable guy,
Mhm.
and Jesus was very fine with that. You don't have to like me. You don't have to agree with everything that I say. And so it was just that main dialogue, the same way with you, Dad. That captivated me, and just watching that back and forth. But even just still watching Shmuel, he keeps running up into obstacles for his desire to nail Jesus. And rather than stop and say, hey, if I'm hitting all these obstacles, maybe I should rethink what I'm doing. He's like all of us. We get a thought in our head and we're going to find anything we can to prove that point. And that's exactly what he's trying to do. Oh, if this one didn't work, okay, I'm going to find someone else and something else. And eventually I'm going to get him nailed. And of course, we know the rest of the story is eventually they do. But it's just interesting watching him determined rather than it's like Ted Lasso. I don't know if you guys have watched the show at all, but the one point when he said, I think it was Walt Whitman that said, be curious, not judgmental. And the religious leaders, Quintus was curious. The religious leaders were judgmental. They didn't want to learn more. They just wanted to draw the lines.
Right.
So it's a great episode. I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah. There's a lot. I like Dad. I liked fretting. Everybody in the episode is unsettled. Jimmy, you use that word. They're unsettled, except for Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
In the midst of it all, every single person in there is unsettled. Not one is calm, except Jesus. That's the only one in this episode that plays that out. So it stretches us a bit with that. His peace, we'll get there eventually with that. But I find it challenging. I don't see, me personally, it was always peace. It was everybody else's actions and reactions inside, right? Jesus wasn't looking to be the king that was battling Rome, where they were expecting all of that. The reason they brought him in, and the reason we have Jerusalem that let him in, was for that purpose, to conquer Rome. Was never his intent. He never talked about it. That was never the issue. So it's our actions that bring that discredit, that bring that discord to it. It's us acting out in that. And I wrote this down, and we're not there yet because we get this point where Matthew says he's ready for this Sermon on the Mount. And I said, do you think that Jesus only preached this one? Did he preach a sermon only once? Or was it more than once? I would say that, like, Dad's been on the tour. Dad, did they mention on the Savannah tour the I Have a Dream with Martin Luther King?
I don't remember.
Okay,
If he did, it wasn't a highlight for him.
right. He gives, yeah. So in
Oh, yes,
when
he
we
did. He
first,
said that's the church that he first gave that
Mhm.
sermon. He
but
pointed it
that's
out.
it, right?
Right.
So the thing is that speech that we have down in history wasn't a speech. It was excerpts from a sermon
Mhm.
that he told. The very first time he quote unquote preached that sermon
Right.
was here in Savannah, but that was preached many other times and
Right.
eventually worked its way to elements from that became the I Have a Dream.
Mhm.
Okay. And so I wonder when we have these things that we get up that this is the point that he's winding up this defining point in his ministry here, because we have two major groupings, that the 4,000 and the 5,000, that are not Sermon on the Mount chat, that are mentioned as a group but not what he talked about, right? So is there, and then with that group got the same deal, and this was his repetitive theme. In other
Mhm.
words, when he was talking, he's talking along these lines and then goes back the other way. Um, uh, Dallas put it in the phrase that he put it, this sermon would define his entire ministry.
Mhm.
So it kind of becomes the theme, the focal point. Everything would have to be in line if that's the case.
Mm-hmm.
When we get there, which we're going to get there soon to the Sermon on the Mount piece, maybe we should consider some episodes, maybe even talking about those chapters that are partial to those, because that's kind of important part as well. Maybe we do at the end, maybe do it after there. I don't know. Just throwing that out there. The discussion with Simon and Andrew in the boat. Again, a flip of personality, because
Mhm.
Simon is usually the one that's all spun up, and Andrew tends to be
Right.
the one drawing him back in, and we have an entire flip.
Mhm.
And they're going at, and there's a point where they even talk about that this maybe even will lead to war.
Mm.
That line actually gets said. So again, they're still thinking war is the deal. When the group gets in, they are so discombobulated, right? This has them rattled so much so, and they turn on themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
We get this messy discussion amongst themselves. Not their best moment. However, what did I write? I wrote, I have been, let's see, and the discourse of the group, I said, wow, how many sandals have we been with them? I, for one, have worn probably every single sandal in the group.
Mm-hmm.
Every single one of those people in some situation, I have had those sandals on. Everyone. And in a sense, that's not a good thing. It's not, except maybe Philip later in life, not in the beginning, but later in life. Of, hey, let me go follow with Andrew. I have a little experience in jails and and chases to keep Andrew from losing his marbles. But the attack on Mary, how did you take that, Daddy-O? The because um, that was a stab by a couple of them.
I could definitely see why they would say that because they felt like she deserted, she copped out. Uh, but uh, we're talking about possibly some of those guys were teenagers, but they were all very young. And you were, as we're sitting and talking, you said, I've worn those sandals. That's maturing. We change our sandals when our feet get bigger. We change the way that we approach things from experience when we see God at work, when we see Him changing our lives, when we see Him changing others, and and that's what I saw. They're at an age when everything is about action.
Hmm.
We got to move. We got to act on this. The West Side Story. We got to blow big. We got to go big. It was that youth, and I liked when Peter defended Mary. We don't know what happened to her. Something
Yeah.
horrific in that. So there's a whole lot of emotions that and it's time when Jesus says at the end, it's time to Matthew, they're going to start changing. But what I thought was interesting is Mary did not defend herself
Hmm.
until that one when she said, I left and that was a mistake. But it wasn't a defense. It wasn't a, how dare you say anything to me about that? You don't know what I've been through, which is how
Hmm.
I would sometimes respond to somebody that says something that doesn't know me really.
Hmm.
She didn't. She felt bad about it. She says, and I'm sorry I did that. What have I done in my life? And afterwards I say, gee, if that had been become known,
Hmm.
what kind of representative would I have been to Jesus?
Hmm.
And that's kind of my take on Mary, along with some ramblings.
Yeah, no, it was Mary's response was that what you just said, that Mary's response was the critical because amid, amid all of that mean, and it was um, to uh, to turn and she didn't, right? She
Yeah.
didn't. No excuse. No, no. You haven't been through what I've been through. That thing that is often pops up, right? Um, interesting, interesting. Jimmy, what? You had something else?
Yeah, a little different take, but it's very similar. I think
Shoot
what
it.
was going on was a lot of secondary emotions based on they just recently heard the news about John the Baptist, which made the reality of danger very real, and all of a sudden they're feeling it and it's very eminent now.
Yeah,
Andrew in particular. And I think
yeah.
I think the fear that he was feeling about John was being carried over in anger toward, and I think everybody else was too. I think anger was coming out, and it reminded me, Dad. I don't know if you remember back when we got in that car accident on Easter, um, and we were in the Kingswood station wagon. Remember that?
Oh yeah.
And I remember you got angry,
Oh
and
Fear brought
because
out
you were
the
so
response
afraid.
was
Yeah,
anger out of fear drove the
exactly.
anger. Wasn't the other way around. Yeah,
And that's
yeah.
very much a more of a male thing than a female thing, but I think there are probably some women that maybe the mama afraid for her family comes
Will
out in anger or whatever.
right.
um but in that's what I saw, that this everybody was turning because they were all so afraid.
I'll bite.
And I
I'll bite.
I don't think they necessarily were mad at each other. If
Right.
you were to take that fear, it just that's how it came out.
Right.
You could see it, and
Totally.
and I loved Mary's response when she was criticized, and she said, "I listened to my own reasoning, not his."
Mm.
you know, and she said, it's on me. It was totally me. If I'd have listened to him, things had been fine. But she took responsibility, and I thought that
Mhm.
was really good. And I think that kind of helped diffuse a little bit too, in terms of what was
Yeah.
going on.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Um,
for sure.
but everybody, and honestly, it probably is true for Shmuel. He's afraid because he doesn't know what category to put Jesus in, and so the only thing he knows how to do is to get angry and say he's doing something wrong.
Well, I
And
watched a little. They recap each episode with
mhm,
the rabbi and the four of them, uh, and they addressed that with Shmuel,
mhm,
and they said that he believed what he was saying. He believed
mhm,
that he was being attacked, that they were in danger of
yeah,
this man speaking against and was going to tear down everything he believed in. So they said it's not he's not this evil guy out to
yeah,
they're attacking just like you would I would do if somebody attacked Jesus. I
yeah,
might say that. So I thought that was
yeah.
I'd never seen that before. I'd never seen that they do a wrap up and they give their opinions on what happened.
Hmm,
So I'm going to do that every time now because I learned
cool.
some things from that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Shmuel, they are acting. Don't forget, Rome is whatever they think they want to do.
Hmm.
They're doing because they're worried about is peace in the region. They don't have to put garrisons out there and spend money with for people, troops and
Right.
stuff. Um, if they think that he is speaking something that goes against Torah,
Hmm.
they're
Mhm.
doing exactly what
Right.
they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
So they're not out of line. What you have is their understanding of what he's saying
Right.
is skewed. Okay. And um, the expectation, again, both sides have expectations,
Hmm.
and the expectations are off. Because I this was the upside down thought I had. Okay. Is that the uh those that like Peter and Andrew and the disciples, they all want Simon. They want war. The people want war, right? They
Hmm.
they want to flip over Rome, and they're looking at him and going, "He's not that guy."
Yeah.
Okay, so they're reading it with an expectation of being actually more educated in the deal. The expectation, they actually have a greater expectation of what this is, and he's not playing that out. And then when you start throwing in terms of Son of Man, right, some
Hmm.
other titles that are mentioned, um, um, rile those things. So they're working. That's why Shmuel is working through this. One of the
Yeah.
questions when he asks when they're pushing for the healing, and they say, was it on Shabbat, not Shabbat? And one of the questions he asked is, what if you find out it wasn't on Shabbat? In other words,
Hmm.
the healing that you're trying to do, because
Hmm.
that was the leper out on the road.
Yeah.
So we don't know whether that was Shabbat or not. In the story context,
Hmm.
but there was, well, and what if it's not? And it stopped him for a second, because what if in your research you find out it's not what you think it is?
Mm.
And I think that's what it is when you find out it's not what you think it is.
Hmm.
And Jesus seems to be that way through a lot of things, not what you think he is. And
Yeah.
I'll bite today that I would say that people, when you ask them, if you were to take somebody and say, well, describe Jesus, explain Jesus, blah blah blah, or give me a little history and a little future view,
Hmm.
and you go, that's interesting. I'm not sure that lines up with the
Yeah.
scriptures, per se. That's not going to line up. So you have this deal, okay, and that's us today, 2,000 years later.
Hmm.
They don't have anything that we have past them existing
Yeah.
with the same expectation.
Mhm.
And that makes it hard. And so in moments like those, the fear that then draws out the frustration, the anger, the whatever
Hmm.
you're looking at is set up. Um, the fear. So you have them all wanting war and worried about him being captured because now that John just got, you're right, Jimmy, you mentioned John's already in that. So they're upside down in this whole deal. And then you have his Ema. You have Mary. And she's sitting there. And for her, it's a totally different feeling. The other guy, what she's feeling, none of the other feel. Not at all. And he didn't turn around and say, let me say goodbye to everybody. Let me get back to camp. Let Matthew know, or any kind of stuff. Can I say goodbye to my mom? And Gaius being that when you realize the whole situation is played out, he's been submissive. He's been cooperative. And so why not is really the place. So he gets a chance to say, relax. I'll be back.
That's an Arnold That's where Arnold Schwarzenegger got that line from.
I'll be back.
I'll be back.
Yeah, that's right, Dad. He got it from The Chosen and went
From
to the future,
right.
from the Terminator. He took it back with him from now with this. See, there you go.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we'll be sure to carry that one down the line. Yeah. See how far that gets us. Okay. Anything else that's jumping out at you? I'm just using the notes I had to do.
Well, the only thing when Jesus is released and he comes back and they're all over him, and where have you been? You know what happened? And he says, I went to pray.
Yeah.
And you went to pray. You couldn't have come and talked to us first. You just went to pray. And then they started. And Jesus released, he goes to pray. They ask him to teach them how to pray. And he says, now we're getting there.
Now you're asking the right question.
This is what we're talking about. Let's start there. So that got to me. And the very last line, he said that the time has come to Matthew. Those two little blurps kind of punched me in a good way. Oh,
Jimmy.
The only other thing I had, and it's just kind of a side note, I was looking back through trying to figure out, did Jesus ever get, arrested before his final arrest, and questioned or anything? It's like, I didn't see anything in scripture about that. So I was doing some research online and came across an article where they were talking about these three characters, Quintus, Gaius, and Atticus. And Quintus is the translated Son of God. That's what his name means. And I thought, this is an interesting choice for Dallas to use that name for that character who doesn't exist in scripture. And so you have a son of God who was questioning the Son of God.
Well, he's representing Rome. So put him in the seat of son of Caesar, right? We'll just use that for a seat flip scenario where he's representing the God of Rome, so to speak, and doing that. So good one. I like that.
Little kind of like the little G versus big G,
for sure. Of course, they think it's the other way around, but it's the other way around. Yeah, I get you. Okay, so this hit me. Wrap this up. Dad, you mentioned the time frame at the end when Jesus is coming in. And so I wrote this. I said, remember the stories in Nehemiah about the watchers on the wall. When I saw Simon the Zealot standing with the torch, it reminded me of that. He's standing there. He's on watch, looking out. But this other story also popped in my head, similar to that. Was that the other story was the parable about keeping the lamps lit for the return, the bridegroom.
Yep.
Just that's what popped in Bob's head.
Nice.
So I have watchers on the wall and looking, Nehemiah, and then I have lamps lit and a bridegroom, both waiting for, and And so, and the watchers on the wall are looking for, because Simon's looking for danger. What he gets is the bridegroom. Now he doesn't know that yet. You know, we're not at that point in the deal. But what he's looking for are his enemies. What he gets is the bridegroom.
Yeah.
Just a chewer. I don't
That's
know.
good.
Thought.
Good chewer.
Yeah. And then were you surprised that the last deal was, oh, let me give you an idea how to pray the Lord's Prayer in a very intimate setting.
Yes.
We get introduced to the Lord's Prayer in a very, very intimate scenario. Again, how they're saying out, was that the first time said, second time said, multiple times said scenario, which is good, and how it makes that element into Sermon on the Mount. Yeah. Okay. So next time we get together, we'll be wrapping up season 2. We'll be on episode 8.
Yep.
So and we'll get up, and should be fun.
Yeah.
Should be fun. Yep. Okay. So our point to ponder is our continuing point to ponder with these. And it's an interesting that when you get to, again, chosen, that these, even in their rattled moments, their scared moments, their where fear is driving them, that they're still the chosen. That doesn't change. Neither will with you. So thanks for with us tonight again on another Sons of the Father on the Dusty Feet.